Maksym Viktorovich, first of all, thank you so much, and I think that I'll be joined by all of the presentees in the studio. You can provide a round of applause. I would like to say that, first of all, that was a very ambitious and that is why very exciting presentation. I think that the presentees, employees here, who are more integrated in the process, they have considered that in a more natural way. But we are watched in the broadcast by lots of people, so I think there is a certain shift of the cliches, a kind of the miscorrespondence. What you are mentioning is a totally revolutionary change. They would be impossible without the support of the society. So how can a company impact the formation of the certain societal narratives? How can you give everybody, both your present and potential customers, everybody without the exclusions, employees in the fields, this system of values, priorities of the environmental way of life, the value of human life, the development, education? How? Thank you for your attention and for your question. I think that it's so relevant now about what we mentioned just now. You know, we've conducted some social surveys, and we're doing that rather often when there are some needs of our customers in that. And of course, today, unfortunately, in Ukraine, there is such a situation that the material welfare, the opportunity to have a nice salary, are now coming to the priority as for the needs of our people. But one of the top priorities is the future of the children, the care about the children. And for the people today, and maybe always, this will be one of the main requests for the state and the society. I'd like to be sure that my child is happy. And this is about the future. Today we are speaking about the responsibility of the company for the future generations, the future of our children. This is what's needed. The future should be environmentally clean. The future where we'll have respect for the personality, the future which includes freedom, the development, the opportunity to get education. That's what's needed. And I consider that DTEK somehow needs to provide some kind of an educational work to tell that the changes which we announced and which we did for the 15 years is for the sake of the future of our children. And the more we have in this discussion, in this message, the more allies we have, when we have this critical mass of allies, when the society believes, then the society will understand that such companies and such transformations are needed for the sake of every human being. Because in new Ukraine, there will be living our children. Well, I can really remember sustainable development here, because this is the permanent search of the compromise between the needs of the today's generation and the needs of the future. This is the future of our children you've just mentioned. Would you please tell, is it real, is it totally comprehensible to have the needs of this generation, the generation which is living under the conditions of serious risks and pandemic, which we will definitely mention now? Let us not speak about it only now. But still, in fact, this is a kind of an element of self-restriction. We wouldn't like to be sacrificed. Do you understand what I mean? We think about the future, but still we satisfy our needs. How can we make it compatible? This is sustainable development. Well, you know, we cannot be in the future because we don't have the time machine. We are speaking how DTEK should look like in 10 years. We showed the portrait of our company. But this is the road which we need to go along. We are living in the reality. We need light electrical energy in the households. We need accessible price of the electrical energy. The services should be accessible. And when we speak about digitalization today, for that, we need internet at home to use those new technologies and so on. And of course, we are realists. So we are going along this road knowing whom we'd like to become. It seems to me it's so important for any company, and for us, first of all, to see the goal, to know for the sake of what we are doing all of that, to create trust with our customers, with our consumers, with the people, the trust with the society. It would be impossible to be a successful company without the trust of the society and the success in Ukraine. And I think that today it's not the first time when we're speaking about our goals, about our future, about the portrait of DTEK. So it's so important for us, for those announcements and declarations to coincide with the actions which we are providing. Okay, but not everything depends on you. There is a so-called unpredictable factors. So please, the last year, this is what 2020 taught us. We don't know anything about our own future, though we can predict and forecast and even plan a lot. The pandemic, the first in this millennium, but maybe it's not the last one. How it impacted directly onto the business of DTEK? This is the first point. And secondly, how do you plan to implement the new strategy in the new pandemic reality? Well, because it's more than for 1 year. You see, the new strain of the virus modifications, the new pandemic reality is formed. Then how? Well, you know, DTEK was working during 15 years in such a, I would say, unstable environment. So we know how to convert the problems and the challenges into the dignities and strengths that maybe pandemic, of course it impacted our financial outcomes and business outcomes, but it was a very big push, a huge push to provide certain changes which we're not seriously considering before. From the simplest things, like remote mode of work, because we were speaking about this schedule for about 5 years, but we couldn't create it as the structurally hierarchical company. But today, in spite of the end of the pandemic or not, approximately 30% of our office employees will be working remotely. We found the model for each business when it is not only interfering, but vice versa, it will improve our efficiency, beginning with that and ending with our discussion about the values. Because such dramatic changes touched each of us so much that you're just unwillingly thinking about the mission of the company, why the company is working at all, what's important for the company, why our people are spending 2/3 of their lives in this company. For the sake of what? For the material welfare, or maybe for some more important points, and for our future. That is why I look forward with some optimism. The pandemic taught us a lot. It made us cope with such complications and challenges which we didn't know before. But it also made us change. It made us to speed up in the processes and become the leaders of these changes in Ukraine. And we will remind about the risks which we knew before. Ukraine has its own peculiar set of risks. But a bit later, dear friends, if you'd like to ask the question, would you please look at me and just let me know that you'd like to take part in our dialogue, please, and we'll definitely join you. But still, one more question, which is very important for me. This is the value system for the business. Very often we're speaking about our society as the society of the winning social Darwinism. How, in this environment, can we explain to the business, first of all, that the money is not the aim, but the tool to transform the society? In fact, this is ESG. Those are the obligations, not just principles, but obligations which you are taking. A totally different orientation of the business, not only to earn money and to satisfy social needs, but also to act under the impact of social expectations, emotions. It's a different kind of business. The company which takes such obligations can't be competitive in the Ukrainian business environment. Well, maybe not today, but I think that this is the consensus of the society, and especially of the new generations, that we'd like to be in Europe. We'd like to integrate to the max into the environment where the European countries are working and the European society is living in. And believe me, trust me, the future of the company cannot be successful if it is not changing and it's not implementing such ESG principles. I've already mentioned about that today. It is becoming not just the need or the declaration or the values which depend on the stakeholders of the company or the shareholders or the top management. This is the business requirements. Today, such companies which are not compliant to these requirements won't be funded. There won't be capital. And if you don't have access to the capital markets, you cannot speak about any ambitious aims on the development, on the expansion, the growth, and so on. That is why I think that today we've got a transformation ongoing, which is more and more should be understood by Ukrainian companies, that if we don't change, if in our corporate life and behavior we are not compliant to those principles, we won't be able to work in the modern environment. Well, but you mentioned about the international investment capital. How is it behaving with their amendments to the risks connected with the pandemics, and on the other hand, the risks which are inherent to the Ukrainian reality? Do they want to cooperate with us, whether they are active getting in touch with us? Where are you searching for partners as the company of DTEK? What is the geography of your interests? Well, you know, it seems to me that in the questions of international capital, the most important word is trust. And we are speaking about ourselves as a Ukrainian company. And the direct association is with Ukraine as a country. And the practices and the regulations, the obligations which Ukraine took as a country. And all of the Ukrainian companies directly depend on that in the relationship with the foreign partners. Respect for law, fairness, respect for private real estate and private property, the respect for investors, the equal rules of the game, strong and independent institutions which are regulated by the branch, and so on. I can list them endlessly. Those are all components of trust. The components of trust which define whether we have international capital, the price of the international capital, the wish of the Western companies to come. Rather often, before the pandemic, we've met with the potential partners who were interested in us, the biggest European companies, and, unfortunately, rather often I heard that, so far, Ukraine is not on their corporate map of their development and expansion of business. Why? And then they mentioned what I listed above. And as speaking about the values and responsibility for the future of our country, the future of our children, is to create all of the conditions for this trust to emerge, because with the international partners, not only the money is coming to the country, but also the practices are coming, the values are coming, the principles of ESG, which we are mentioning about, are coming. In the European countries, it is becoming the part of the corporate life, and we are only starting and trying to decipher this acronym. So I think that this is the homework, a home task for the business, both Ukrainian and the Ukrainian authorities. Well, maybe yes, for the business, but for all of the citizens. When I spoke about a certain cognitive difference, I meant our usual daily life. And suddenly here is emerging... Here are your guys with smart grids and artificial intelligence, which is working already. Just yesterday I was mentioning that, yes, we are just providing Wi-Fi through the energy. This is the precedent at their mind. Is it science fiction? Yes, we spoke about that yesterday, right? Or maybe the story about telemedicine. That's incredible, in my opinion. It's so cool, such the perspectives which are opening. In fact, I'd like to speak about the context of the studies, about digitalization, the training. And this is again about the level and compatibility. Can we provide digital reforms, transformations of such level beyond the transformation of the whole energy sector. I would say even more, beyond the transformation of the whole economy of the country. It's possible, because we are doing that, and I consider that in our country, during the last year and a half, lots of things were made from the point of view of digitalization in the scale of the country. I give the round of applause to those heads of the departments and the guys who are doing that. DIA maybe is the most demonstrative story, because we are also having some common solutions to use this app to promote our program of training. I do hope that we will achieve certain agreements, but we wanted to answer the question what digitalization in DTEK is. Because you can take a cell phone, you can create it for the employees and to say, we are now digital because we have cell phones. No. We were creating the formula of digitalization for ourselves, a high-scale program with the name of MODUS, and we will be speaking about it in details later, which in the first wave has been defined what the digital mine is, what the digital electrical power station is, what the digital field is. And we've created the image of the future of the digital mine. The solution about the Wi-Fi in the mine was not spontaneous, because this is the trend. This is the well-thought-through technology which allows us to manage the production and the security. And the same story is about the electrical power stations. We are speaking today that we need to weigh in the economic effect and the opportunities of digital technologies. And in fact, digital technologies today help us to manage the modes of the work in the electrical power stations. They provide us predictive analysis, and not to repair everything, but only the thing where we have the high probability of any of the breakage. So that's what we do in our business. We don't do that to the high scale for everyone to, for everybody in the country to use it. So I would say yes, it is possible. But when we are coming to the consumer, when we are suggesting new services for the consumer, we depend on the scale of the country. Whether, for instance, the person has access to the internet to use the service. This is where we depend on the state. But I think that today's trend and the message from the power, from the authorities, is rather powerful as for digitalization of the country. Let us speak a bit more about the leading conception and thinking, because among today's participants, the participants of the presentations of the strategy, we don't have a single woman as the speakers, but I can see women in the audience. There are women. Would you please tell, what's it connected with? Is there a certain discrimination within DTEK? Or maybe this is a peculiarity of the branch. The woman cannot implement herself. The men are smiling here, even at the level of the directors of the companies, right? They are smiling. But no, it's not funny. I will stop smiling now. Well, you know, we are always trying to objectively acknowledge our mistakes and underdoings. So maybe this is the lack of the gender balance in the top management. And I don't think that this is connected with the peculiarity of the branch. I think that there cannot be successful discussion or decision-making without the presence of a woman. And unfortunately, among the speakers, but also among certain teams, we have some issues about that. We take certain obligations to correct this situation. Okay, let's speak about the obligations more. This word of client-centricity, one of the most important ones, a huge consumers network. From the individual households to the bigger customers and businesses, would you please tell, do you have such a notion, a certain similarity to the book of complaints and suggestions? Do you look through it? Or is it done at the level of dissolutions when we speak about the consumers only? Believe me, our dissatisfied clients, never let us forget about them if they are dissatisfied. Weekly, I get some angry applications and agreements and announcements. Weekly, I read a nice feedback in Facebook, looking at the comments to some of the announcement of DTEK. The most efficient and speedy feedback, because it's automatically coming to the head of the business. Either this is dissolutions or DTEK grids. Mostly we have two recipients of such feedback. I consider that the feedback, the respect to the customer, to his or her requests, the response, timely response, is the most important reason for the development of the business which is working with the end customer. Unfortunately, there is lots of dissatisfaction. I acknowledge that, and I admit it. Our team is working at its best for this dissatisfaction to be mitigated and decreased. There are some questions with the technologies and about the amount of investments, and the new system of rating and pricing for RAB. It will allow to invest more into the reliability and accessibility of the grid, and I think that this is how we get rid of certain of the complaints. The active development of the digital technologies and dissolutions which will allow to respond quickly. We are trying to follow monthly. We're getting the feedback, systematizing and providing surveys. And we have a separate department on the customer's experience. So we're getting feedback, and whether it's working, we can quickly responding. I'm objectively acknowledging and admitting the criticism. This is the criticism which I can hear as well. It's not created to punish someone or to quarrel with something, but to respond quickly and to change quickly. We have taken the proper way, and I'd like to look in the eyes of our consumers honestly, and this will be the moment when they will give us the round of applause. Maksym Viktorovich, one more point about the proper way. There was lots of visionary approaches. I wouldn't say this is just the strategy. This is the serious vision of the very distant future, not just 2030. So lots of people say that we are living in the world of risks and opportunities. Pandemic emphasized that. But if we're speaking about the risks and opportunities, which would you name adding to what you've already mentioned? Risks and opportunities, where do you see them? Well, you know, we need to get used to the changing character of the world, because we are permanently living in the environment of risks and opportunities, and the ability of the company to respond flexibly, to adapt and to adjust itself, to take the decisions quickly, to take away the bureaucracy which interferes into the decision-making, to know the best practices will allow us to change. Even today's strategy and our announcements are more about the trends, the vision, as you've mentioned properly, about the directions, but we cannot write down how much the business will earn in 10 years, or what's the coal extraction volume will be, because the world is rapidly changing. So Ukraine has crazy opportunities. I consider that Ukraine is an underrated country, and I'm always telling that to our potential investors. The opportunities which are given by the energy sector will never be found in any European countries but Ukraine, and both in the implementation of the technologies and customers and clients' practices, and also the ROIs, return on investments, and so on. I wouldn't speak only about the risks. There are always lots of them, and we cannot define all of them. We just need to get to know how to respond quickly. But the opportunities is what making Ukraine a unique country. Maksym Viktorovich, and the last point, the last question. Would you please tell? Success of DTEK. Is it possible without the success of the subjectivity of our country, without the success of Ukraine? Totally not. There cannot be one company which is successful in the country which is not successful. There cannot be possible for the company such big as DTEK in separation with Ukraine. So I think that success of Ukraine is success of DTEK, and I consider that The value line which we've presented today, first of all connecting it to DTEK, has the direct relationship to our country. The new system of coordinates in the corporate sector of business and the society is the future success of Ukraine. I am sure that we are all proud of our country. And what we're doing that not only for our company. Okay, then thank you again. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome again the CEO of DTEK, Maksym Timchenko. A round of applause from you.